Today's video, we're going to be checking out the NECA Toys Terminator 2 Judgment Day. This is the Cinemachines Hunter Killer Aerial. Normally I would take the dimensions and then show you the display stand after the fact, but because the vehicle sits atop of this clear stand, I figured it would probably make more sense to tell you exactly how tall that is once it's on its display stand. So we take it to the very top fin, back portion of the ship here. It's roughly about 7 inches in height. Okay, we'll also take the length of it. From the end to the tip, or the front, it's 7 inches long. Now we can take it off the display stand. The display stand, I can actually wiggle it off here, is one thing I'm not super crazy about. NECA has used these before. These are a clear display neck. You can see that it's got a base bottom to it. Clear neck, and then up at the top there, it has an adjustable, more so right here, it has a little adjustable peg. This section right here I thought could rotate, just the way it's actually been assembled. But this part right here hinges up and down. Two things wrong with this, one of which being the screw. Over time, I've had a couple of Cinemachines do this. This clear, the little peg portion here up at the top, every once in a while you may have to tighten it with a screwdriver, as it does get a little bit loose. And a lot of weight sits on this peg. So, you know, again, that's going to add a little bit of extra weight to the screw starting to loosen up. The other problem is, because it's clear, and it's just this little small clear peg, I really don't like all the time having to peg it into the bottom here. It fits actually right into this little hole, but with it being clear plastic, I'm always worried about it cracking on me, or chipping or splitting. That's what it looks like with it on the stand. But again, like longevity to that staying upright, you may have from time to time just kind of have to tighten that little screwdriver. And I probably would advise not doing this all that often, taking the peg off, putting it back in, taking it back off. Because every time that you're doing this, I always feel like something sooner or later is going to cause that peg to break right off. Just put that right there for a second. As for the Hunter Killer Aerial, to be exact, actually, this is from Terminator 2 Judgment Day 3D. Didn't mention that at the beginning of this review. But it's still the Hunter Killer Aerial that we've seen in the other Terminator films as well. And it's really a fantastic looking specimen here. You may not be able to tell, but like this part right here, from this part to this part is die-cast metal. It is actually metal. The sides feel as if they're plastic. The fins, the wings on the back feel like they're plastic. And then basically all the stuff on the underbelly, the undercarriage of it, is also plastic. There is a little bit of poseability, but really not to the level that I thought there was going to be. I thought these little turbines would have been able to rotate. Sadly, that not be the case. On the underside, these little extra arms, they don't move. These backs also don't move. And I don't know if they're landing struts or if they're actually just claws, like they're supposed to, like grabbing down, because we've seen these things have the means to kind of reach down and grab things as well. No, in fact, the only thing that really rotates on this is this part right here, this little gun turret. The turret neck moves back and forth, stops to about there, and then you have poseability here via a very, very small peg. It allows the turret to angle, which is good, up and down. And it also rotates all the way around, but that's really all you're going to be getting. This is the kind of thing as well you may want to be very careful about doing. Don't have it, holding it in hand with this. You don't accidentally want to drop this, as it would fall on here and break this right off. A lot of nitpicks, not really necessarily nitpicks, but just kind of like FYI, just things to be aware of. Now, we have recently just looked at another Cinemachines. Let's reach off camera and bring that in. The very impressive Hunter Killer tank. And I'll fold the turret down so you guys can get a rough size comparison as to how big the turret, or how big the killer tank is versus the killer aerial. Also move this stand out of the way, we don't need this right now. We turn this to the side, and we turn this to the side. Actually, we'll do like a side-by-side comparison. They're about the same length. Obviously, big differences is the sheer width and just overall size of the one over the other, even though they are roughly about the same sort of length. They're great companion pieces, really. I was trying to think to myself whereabouts where I would put these, and I think the answer I would probably have is, I guess if I can actually display these maybe in front of my Blu-ray collection, or movie collection. I'll try to put these in front of the Terminator movies. So we already had a look at the Hunter Killer tank. If you want a more in-depth coverage of that, check out my review. Move that out of the way. The coloring, by the way, on the Hunter Killer aerial is to the same, actually, you know what? Let's just bring it back in. It's to the same extent, really, as the Hunter Killer tank. Although, because the Hunter Killer tank is more of a ground vehicle, as one would expect, it's got some additional browns and some more dirty griminess to it. The aerial, because it sits or hovers above land, it's a little bit cleaner in comparison. It does have some kind of dirt areas to it, where you would imagine like the exhaust from the turbines have started to kind of dingy or dirty up the areas of its metal, but otherwise it's generally a pretty clean looking piece. The front have these blue, what I can only gauge to be headlights or floodlights, and they're a nice pastel blue, but all the rest of the entire ship sits in almost more of a silver color. And then it's got some almost dry washing there of like a darker gray. It's got some really fantastic details to it. I love the turbines. I love these little interior areas where you can see all these additional kind of moldings and sculpting that they've added to it. It's really a shame that these don't move, but there's not always instances where every single thing on the vehicle will rotate, will move. In this case, the only thing that's really moving, though, is the already mentioned gun turret. The only thing I would say is, I guess that would be the best place that they could have put the peg, but it's also just a pain in the butt, too, to get the peg around the gun turret. A lot of times it's best to just kind of bring that down as much as you can and then wiggle. See, it doesn't give you much clearance between the peg point and the gap where the gun turret sits. So you may want to put that in first and then obviously just compensate and bring the gun turret back once you've got that in the place that you want it. It will technically allow you to rotate it as well, but you may want to decide first and foremost where you want to rotate this before you plank it completely down on the peg. Again, if this is too tight and you start rotating it, you do run the risk of breaking that peg clear off. It's not as heavy as the Hunter Killer tank, obviously by its sheer size. That one's a little bit heavier by comparison. But it's nice that NECA didn't give this just an all plastic treatment. By making this metal, this area right here, it feels substantial in hand. It feels, when you are picking it up, it feels like a high quality collectible and not, you know, as good as the sculpt may be, all plastic. I would have picking it up, it would have felt a little bit lighter. I certainly like the fact that they've incorporated a die cast, or at the very least, a metal component being the front to the very back of it. Obviously, clear plastic is the best way to go, so it does look somewhat invisible, so it looks like the Hunter Killer aerial is hovering above the ground. The downside, though, to it is clear plastic always worries me, the longevity of it. Putting pegs in, for example, pulling the peg back out, putting it back in, you may run the risk of, like I said, that peg potentially breaking. The last thing you also want to do is start rotating the vehicle once it's already attached to the peg. Kind of decide in advance what you want to do with it, and then you have the means to, which angle you want to put it at, and then plank it down on the peg. The stand aside, it's one awesome looking vehicle, one of my all-time favorite vehicles. Like I said with the Hunter Killer tank, two of my favorite vehicles from the sci-fi films, Terminator. One of my favorite aerial vehicles has been the Hunter Killer aerial. I think it really has some really nice design elements to it. And I imagine it would be very menacing to see these things hovering above you as of course, the endoskeletons are walking through the trenches, taking out whatever survivors are on land. Today we were having a look at the NECA Toys Cinemachines Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Forgot to also mention it was Terminator 2 Judgment Day 3D at the beginning of this review, and this was the Hunter Killer aerial. You guys are interested in picking this up for yourself, you can find it at your local comic book store. can't find your local comic book store, that's okay. Head over to www.comicshoplocator.com. No, I'm not sponsored by Comic Shop Locator. I just say that because I know how hard it is from time to time finding a comic book store in my area, and I'm sure you guys at times have had the same similar problems. If you guys also haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, make sure you do so. Of course, more videos will be coming your way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.